Was good. Okay, now we're recording. Okay, so today we're going to do Honor Your Parents, and we've entitled this a dynamic relationship. Let's go to the introduction. The commandment to honor your parents is on the first tablet of the Dibrot, which spell out the relationship between man and God. As we explore this dynamic relationship, we should keep in mind that our tradition views it with great spiritual significance. Let's look at the text here. Source Talmud in Kedushin says, our rabbis taught three partners make a person: God, his father, and his mother. When a person honors his father and mother, God says, I consider it as if I lived among them and you honored me. Okay, that's just a general introduction, setting the scene for this. I think we'll come back to that in the end. Remind me if I don't, because I have a wonderful story about that. Introduction, Pishat, the literal understanding. This debate focuses on the specific relationship we have to our parents. It might seem surprising that the consequence for not honoring this responsibility is so great. Our ability to dwell on the land of Israel. Text. Honor your father and mother in order that your days be lengthened on the land that the Lord your God is giving you. That's the actual diber. In the second version, it says, honor your father and mother as the Lord your God commanded you, in order that your days be lengthened, and it will be good for you on the land that the Lord your God is giving you. So the first one says, honor your father and your mother, in order that your days be lengthened on the land the Lord is giving you. And the second one says, honor your father and mother, like God has commanded you, in order that your days be lengthened, and it will be good for you on the land that the Lord has given you. And the Talmud points out over there, by the way, that this is the only place where the word tov, yitav, tov, appears in the Ten Commandments, and it appears in the second version. The Talmud says, you know why? Because the first ones were broken. They weren't tov. Tov is good, translates to good, but it really means something that endures, something that has form and function that can endure. So only the second tablets endured, and that's why it says tov over here. And then the Talmud points out, you know, the first one was given with a big shofar and lightning and thunder and everything, and they broke. The second ones, Moses came down on Yom Kippur and he had them. So it says, you know, you see, doing things quietly sometimes really pays off. Okay, conversation. In your view, what does it mean to honor your parents? Does viewing your parents as part of the divine determination of your life help you to honor them? Why do you think the length of days on the land is connected to honoring parents? Is it a reward, a consequence? How do we interpret this when living in the diaspora? And according to the Talmud, the version of the Ten Commandments in Deuteronomy is the text of the second tablets. The Talmud comments that the word good, oh, there you go, I wrote it, that the word good only appears in the first version as a hint to the fact that the second tablets were never broken, unlike the first ones. This can be related to broken and whole relationships with our parents. We can understand this to mean that it will be good for you to mend those relationships and make them whole. How does this resonate with you? How can one become whole when they have a difficult parent? Oh, a lot to talk about, right? So I think just to explain actually the second question over here, I'm not sure that it's evident enough that it came through, but it's really referring to this part of the Talmud that says that there are three partners in making a person. And the Maharal of Prague points out, this is really why they are on this commandments on the first tablet, because God works, as it were, with your parents to create you. And that means that he chose that your parents should be your parents. He wanted you to have your parents. That's determination. That's what he calls hashgacha pratit. That's probably the most determinant thing in your life, is who your parents are. So that's really what the second question is asking. Does viewing your parents as part of the divine determination of your life help you to honor them? I'll tell you a story. The story I had in mind was, we were discussing this in a group that I was running, and one of the people there really had a disastrous father. I mean, he told me, he just said to the group, my father was a nightmare. And he told me after, and he really was. He left a trail of destruction wherever he went, this guy. And, you know, this poor man had grown up under this dark cloud. And he always fought with it. He always was, you know, why me? And it wasn't fair, and he's to blame, and he's to blame. And when he considered to, you know, almost look at it like, wait, you know, maybe God wanted me to have to deal with this. Yes, it's hard. It doesn't make it any easier. But it took off the focus from blaming his parent to then starting to accept it. You know, to accept the relationship. It's a relationship kind of we're stuck in for most of us. And to really accept it, and then to start to work with that. And it really, it was like, whoa, it took off such a weight off his shoulders. So that really did, I think, you know, that's what I guess this question is kind of referring to. He was able to start to think, okay, my father was a nightmare. My father's been, I don't think he abused him personally, he just left this trail of disaster. It helped him to even start to look at his father in terms of what could I honor this man? How could I honor him? Instead of just blaming him where there was no place for anything. Okay, you guys.
Yeah, it's very difficult when we have difficult parents and situations to figure out how to handle this commandment. But I think it doesn't say love your parents, you know, it says revere and honor your parents. So perhaps, you know, that was, you know, not kind of implicitly implied that, you know, there might be situations where you can't love them. We're commanded to love God, but we're not commanded to love our parents, just respect them. But it is difficult when, I mean, what if there is a situation where the parents are abusive? One of the things that I have difficulty with is the Torah is pretty silent on child abuse. It's pretty deafening that there's nothing that says anything specific about, you know, how to, you know.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So two things.
It's troubling. So,
right.
But
I think two things. First of all, I know I've heard many times people say this idea that we're not commanded to love our parents, we're only commanded to honor them. I don't like it, because we are commanded to love our parents. It's included in V'ahavta L're'echa Kamocha. And, you know, they're no worse than any other person. So there's no specific commandment to love them. There seems to be this is a specific commandment to honor them. So, you know, okay, maybe it kind of dulls the question a little. The recent, you know, obviously child abuse and dealing with it in an open and legal way is a much more, you know, modern thing in modern society. It's come out. I'm not sure how far back things go. You know, the halachic, the discussion around it actually goes from the point of view that a person is not required to suffer financial or emotional loss in order to honor parents. And that's kind of the, you know, the way that it's approached, that, you know, yes, there is this mitzvah, commandment to honor our parents, but what happens if they're abusive? Well, It depends. You know, the Talmud says you honor your parents, but on their bank account, not on yours. They have to pay. So actually, in I have a curricula for schools, and over there I have an introduction that, you know, if a child has been abused, this might well not apply to them. It's a specific question, but you know, they should think about the parent figures in their life as they approach the debate.
Well, I think on the one hand, I can get with the God determining who your parents would be, because I do appreciate the good things, the qualities and such that I think my parents passed on to me, and also pointing out the tikkunim, the corrections that I need to make in my life, the stuff that I'll take with me also from them. But as you said, my wife is a investigator when it comes to child sex abuse, and I can't get with the God I pray to and believe in, specifically putting a child or teenager or whatever in a situation of emotional, physical abuse, an alcoholic parent who physically abuses. I can't think of that. And that's why I love the honor aspect of it. Honor, and the Talmud quote that you used also points this out. You're honoring the person who, the aspect of giving you life along with God. I think that's where it kind of starts and stops. And if they make a overture to seek forgiveness at some point, that's great. If they don't, it's very painful carrying that around with one.
Mm-hmm.
And I have 2 children because of parents who were not able to take care of them. And I really do still am angered, if you will, that my son didn't have any books in his life until he came to us, and no one read to him. So he started a extreme gap because of neglect, in a sense, among other things. So I can see it both sides, but I think it's a good thing that it says honor and not love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, let's go on here. Introduction. We most commonly use the phrase honor your parents to mean obey and speak to parents with respect. However, the Talmud differentiates between honor, kavod, kaved, in the Ten Commandments, and the mitzvah of respect, yira, found in Leviticus. To be sure, there is a mitzvah to respect parents. However, it is not the literal intent of the diber. Let's see what this means. The text, source 1, Leviticus, I've been Parshas Kedoshim to you. A man, his father and mother, they shall respect, and you shall observe my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. God is not written, is cut off there. Okay. Let's see, source 2, Talmud Kedushin 31b. The rabbis taught, how do we respect and how do we honor? So respect is not sitting or standing in their place, not contradicting them, nor proving them right. Honor is providing them with food and drink, helping them to get dressed, covering them, bringing them in and taking them out. So it really distinguishes between honor as taking care of their needs, providing them with food and drink, helping them get dressed, covering them in the bed, bringing them in and out, and respect, this aviv ish imo va'aviv tira'u, the yira aspect is more what, when we talk about honoring parents, is really more that, which is fascinating.
I wanted to go back a little bit to this last the conversation piece, because I think this is really important. The idea that part of our work as adults is to heal the broken relationships that we had as children. And, I think we all kind of reach adulthood with kind of unfinished business. And I've seen so many times where if you get to adulthood and you haven't reconciled that, and then you have your own children, you kind of repeat certain patterns because you haven't really fixed the brokenness that you came into your adult life with. And, I see this in my own family a little bit with nieces that, I just see the pattern continuing with their children, how, and this idea that these second tablets were broken. So that the first tablets were broken, but the second ones weren't, and they were good. And so I think that I always say the work of an adult is to, kind of mend just come to terms with your parents as fallible, people who did the best for the most part, for most people, did the best they could, and forgiveness of what you didn't get. So I think when you get to that place, because we go through kind of different relationships with our parents as they get older and we start to parent them, and you just have to have all those things right so that you can do it with dignity and grace and love. If you have the unfinished business, it's really hard to do that.
I'm thinking the end of the Parsha last Shabbat, here's Ishmael, who was, shown the door by Abraham with his Hagar. Yet he comes back along with Isaac to see to the burial of their father. That's a beautiful way of honoring, no matter what the circumstances were in your relationships. And
it was as much for Ishmael as it is for Abraham.
Yes, yeah, I agree, and I agree in terms of seeking to heal relationships. Although again, I think it gets more difficult when you get into the realm of real abusive relationships. I see that.
But even then, I don't know if there's other ways of understanding those relationships. That obviously people who do those things are broken themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the Talmudic definition when it comes to honor, because it's a course of nature that you're the child to your parents, but then as they get older, you sort of become the parents to them in a sense.
If you're lucky enough to have parents that age old enough, yes, so that you
I'm looking forward to lighting Hanukkah candles with my 92-year-old mother in a couple of weeks. So yes, I hear you.
Yeah. My dad's 95. There's actually a fantastic book. I don't know if you guys have read it, The Choice by Edith Eger. A wonderful book. She's a Holocaust survivor and she obviously got out and she landed up in the States. She actually lives in San Diego. I think she's about 95. And she became a student of Viktor Frankl. And, it's about her coming to terms with what happened to her, what the Nazis did with her. And, it's not about her really forgiving them. I don't think she'll ever forgive, but it's about her freeing herself of the abuse, freeing herself of being captive by what happened to her, rather than making a choice to move on. A fantastic book. I think it's for any.
See her being a student of Viktor Frankl.
I think your wife would enjoy it a lot if she's in that work.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, because I talk to people all the time about, if you can't get to a place of forgiveness, work on getting to a place of just releasing, like you said, so you're not carrying it around with you.
Okay, let's go on. Rabbeinu Yonah. Here he goes, a Gerrit Teshuvah. The essence of honoring parents is to give them pleasure either through word or deed. So, okay, conversation. According to the Talmud, the commandment to honor one's parents is to take care of their physical needs. Does this resonate with you? Does this only apply when one's parents are needy or infirm? I think we discussed that a little bit already. It's funny, after learning this and going through this, I'm aware of it, and sometimes I would ask my children, in the kitchen or whatever serving, can I have some water? Bring me as a fulfillment of honoring parents.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, when I visit my parents, I really try to do this. It's not something we really were brought up with. It's a strange, in terms of, this is I guess maybe my mindset is this an act of honor? I thought once, if someone really prestigious came to your house, you would honor them with a meal, right? You would dress up and make a nice meal. So I guess that's somewhat the kaved. It comes from the word kavod. Kavod comes from kaved, heavy. There's a heaviness. There's a severity in this relationship. Okay. Whereas we are commanded to specifically honor and respect our parents, there's no specific commandment to love them more than anyone else. Why do you think this is so? We covered that a little, unless anyone wants to add. The Hebrew word for respect is yira. Literally translates to fear or awe. In what ways does respecting parents require elements of fear or awe? That's an interesting one. We're not used to, or we're not encouraged to fear people anymore.
Right, but the same terminology is usually used for God. You have to fear God, and that same yirah is used for that. So I think as being, in that level of these are your parents, the ultimate respect for them, just treating them like, in a divine way, I suppose. I think that's why perhaps that word is used. It's the same, again, that same awesomeness. Although, sometimes these days, I've seen kids treat their parents
I was just thinking about that.
pretty badly.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how
like if oh man, I would some kids are and also it goes both ways. Parents need to teach them that it's not okay to walk all over them in that respect. But
yeah, there's a danger of entitlement with parents.
Mm-hmm.
The sense of entitlement. I'm not sure.
Well, I think there's such a shift in culture, because I remember, when I was little, we would dress up as an adult. Like there was clothing that adults wore that children didn't wear. So, high heels and, whatever, we'd have fake cigarettes and different things. But even culturally, adults dress like children, like adults dress like teens. There's no difference really in the dress. And there's just such a more informality and a loosening of, for good and bad. I think kids are, I think studies have shown that our children are closer to us and more where we have closer bond, closer, they talk to us more, they're more involved with us than we were with our parents.
Interesting. Yeah, people do the same things as their kids.
Right.
People go to nightclubs with their kids. That was unheard of when I grew up.
Right.
So
it's not all bad, because I think
I hear that, but it challenges the vertical
right
nature of the relationship. It puts it on an equal.
In general, we live in a less vertical world than we did in terms of less respect for authority in general.
I think it
started in the 60s.
Yeah, exactly. I thank goodness my kids don't call us by our first names ever, so I don't have to deal with that. We're Abba and Ima. So anyway, no, but I think of the awe thing. I think of the commandment. I am the Lord your God. The addendum is you're not, and I think of awe of parents is I'm the parents. You're not. You're the child, and if you try to reverse those roles, usually doesn't end well. And just recognizing that's sort of the pecking order.
Yeah. But.
Okay. Introduction. Honoring parents is not always easy. As children, we need more from them than they do from us. In our teenage years, we crave independence. As we continue to develop our own lives, we generally form a more equitable relationship with our parents. As our parents age and become more needy, the balance changes once again. Throughout all of these changing dynamics, we are always required to honor and respect our parents. There's a well-known story. Rabbi Toffen had a very short mother. Whenever she wished to get into her bed, he would bend over and she would step on him to ascend. Whenever she wished to get out of the bed, from the bed, she would descend on him. Sharon, I hope you appreciate my joke, but there's child abuse in the Talmud, right there. He came and praised himself in the Beit Midrash. They said to him, his friends, "You still have not reached even half of the honor due to her. Has it ever happened that she threw your purse into the sea in your presence and you did not embarrass her?" This one is same place in the Talmud. A question was asked, from whose funds must one give his parents food and drink? Rav Yehuda said, from the money of the son. Rav Natan bar Ushia said, from the money of the father. The halacha is that the one who says it must be paid from the money of the father. Although he is not required to spend his own money, the son must leave aside his work to honor his father, which may cause him a loss out of potential earnings. Source 3, also there, the sages taught one honors his father in his life and honors them in his death. So, conversation. The text depicts the importance of the obligation fulfilling the command to honor one's parents. Why do you think this is so? The Talmud says that a parent has ability to forego their honor. Do we see this demonstrated in contemporary parent-child relations? How has the expression of this debate changed as our societal norms of how we treat parents and the aged and the expectations of how they should be treated have changed? How far are you obligated to take care of your parents when they resist your help and suggestions? That's a good one for today. And children are not expected to suffer property, physical or emotional harm in order to honor and respect their parents. Where is the line drawn between a child's obligation, parents taking advantage or even abusing their children? Well, it's a lot to talk about here.
Mm-hmm. We've spoken a lot about a lot of these things already.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I know, when I see a lot of my congregants who are aging, and I know what I went through with my own in-laws. We actually moved in to take care of them before they passed away. But it's interesting to see that you don't have to necessarily go through your own financial things to, you don't have to try to pay for everything. They should have enough there, but I do see you're supposed to take the time to, and I see that. It's like we have a situation where there's somebody that, they don't have the time. It's not, and to actually be there and make sure that everything's okay. In this day and age, it's difficult. It's difficult to deal with, and but
what do you do with a parent that doesn't, what if they didn't prepare for their old age, and they didn't
financially,
right?
Yeah,
to do what I get. Yeah, it's.
It looks like from the halachic works that I looked into that if the parents have the money, so then they should pay. If they don't have the money, they are actually the first on your list for charity.
Right.
So and then it says, well, what happens if you don't have money to give to charity? You yourself are breaking through. So it says, well, then it's really the child's obligation to go and find the money, to look for help. And there is a lot of help out there, I think.
Now, as people living much longer, it's that much more difficult.
Yeah.
and it's really hard to go through the process of being on, being sort of the parent to the parent.
Mm-hmm.
And when they don't, when they resist, it's very difficult. You can only go so far. You should do X, Y, Z, and blah, 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 and then everything will be fine. Maybe you should, and then it doesn't happen. So it's really very tough.
Needs a lot of patience. Actually, funny how never thought of, as parents, we know how much patience you need for children. And then as parents get older and the good Jewish parents are going to resist most of your help.
Well,
you need a lot of patience.
Yeah. And sometimes, part of the respect issue is we want, at least for me, you want to I want them to feel that they have autonomy, that we're not saying, all right, you're going here, da, 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 and that's, and that's the ultimate respect. But the little walk on eggshells is trying to negotiate that and treating them with respect. I think that's the key. Making them feel that they have choices, although sometimes at that stage of life, they don't want to make the choices.
Yeah, no, we're going through that right now.
Where
it's very difficult.
You want to make the choices. Yet then you say, okay, so I'll make the choice. Say, I don't like that choice. So it can be difficult, but you ultimately want to make the person feel respected. And sometimes if the, and you see, if you have to be put into a nursing home or something, and sometimes it can be tough because the help there might not be respecting them. And then you might feel as a child that, you're in, it's sort of like going down that road where, well, I put them there and then they're not being respected by the help or what have you. And then I'm responsible. So it can be difficult.
It's hard because I think also it's a frustration on their part naturally because they can't do what they used to be able to do physically, even cognitively necessarily. And it's, and it comes across in an angry way. And sometimes, like you said, you lose patience as a child trying to care, for your parent. And it's challenging.
This is a huge problem for communities. And, because like I live in Hartford, which is a aging Jewish community. And, everybody's talking about what's the communal obligation to people who are shut in, whose children are not around. Does the synagogue take over the responsibility? Is it the rabbi? What is the responsibility of the synagogue community for when the children are not in town or not doing what they need to do? I have a neighbor who's completely senile, doesn't remember that I'm his neighbor. And, the kids I don't know where the kids are. It's like, really, this is not a safe situation. And I don't know who, he's in the synagogue community. What do you do?
Mm-hmm. Very fascinating question. When the child doesn't fulfill this, doesn't many mitzvot, it's even the language is like that, that says, I think for Brit Milah, it's like, the father's obligated. If he doesn't do it, then the child themselves, then the Beit Din, take responsibility. I don't know if that's true. I don't know about anything written like that, but surely as a community we have to deal with this. Here actually in Baltimore, there tremendous amount of money and care has been put into the elderly. Actually, through most of the money came from what's it? Harry and Jeanette Weinberg. You'll know that, Ken, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
They were ahead of their time. They've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. No, my mother-in-law lives in a wonderful facility, which is so cleverly planned. It's, the people are it's independent living, but it's for elderly people, and they just do such a good job, and it's well thought out, and it's really perfect for it.
Those places are not inexpensive. You have to be able to afford them, and this whole push of living at home and people want to age at home. And I don't know about that. I mean, I think when you age at home, you can become very isolated.
Yeah, actually, when we bought our house, we had a garage and we converted it into a cottage for my mother-in-law. And she lived there for a few years but got very bored and lonely.
Yeah.
And then she moved into this Weinberg, and she's got more friends than we do now.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I know, we have kids like that too.
She got all day to spend with them.
Right. So.
Okay. Yesod, the underlying meaning, principle. Imagine how indebted you would feel towards someone who saved your life. And if they took care of you with clothing, food, and accommodation, how much more grateful would you feel? What if they also provided you with an education? How would you repay them? So, in the best case scenario, this is one's parents. Text. Sefer Chinuch. It's a bit abbreviated. The root of the mitzvah to honor parents is that it is fitting to acknowledge and return the kindness to those who have been good to us, especially when it comes to parents. To take to heart that they are the reason we exist, like you say, and brought us up. For these, it is truly fitting to honor them in every way. And I think somehow, our memories are very short. And when we look at our parents, we often, I think we're all in the same boat. If we have parents or have recently had parents, it's hard to remember how much they really did for us. But if you stop to think about it, it's remarkable how much they did for us. So of course, we should, take care. And it does speak to a very important character trait that should be developed throughout in all relationships. Is being able to, we would call it hakarat hatov, but I think it's more than just recognizing the good. It's really repaying it. Okay. Conversation. Is the mitzvah of honoring biological parents different for adopted or fostered children? Ken, you said your kids are adopted?
Yes, they are. Brother and sister.
How old were they when you got them?
Son was 4 and my daughter was 10 months. And
wow.
Babies.
It's really hard for them because they have, challenges. Just we don't have the the huggy, kissy, close, love you kind of thing with them. They just it's kind of what they experienced before they came to us kind of thing, and we kind of knew that it would be difficult for them to how explicit a relationship or loving relationship they could form with us or with others, but they show it other ways. They do bond with us, but just maybe not. It's a little more challenging for them. Because also they know their birth family.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, their birth father died some time ago, and actually their birth mother's in prison, so they haven't seen her for a while because she's on the mainland now. So, but we did visit her when she was here, and before that, when she was not in prison, we visit. And they know their biological grandmother and whatnot.
Well, that really speaks to the next question. Is one obligated to honor a parent who is absent after conception or birth? I guess that's from the kid's point of view.
I think just they would kind of have this idealized notion of what relationship could be with their birth parents, but unfortunately just doesn't seem to be in the cards. Yeah.
Underlying this debate is a sense of indebtedness and gratitude to our parents. Since in contemporary times we have more control over reproduction, for whose benefit are children brought into this world? Does the intention of parents have an effect on this debate? That's Audrey's question, by the way.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I think, I mean, think, we've had children. What were we thinking when we had children? We often look at each other now and think we were mad. But,
Right, right. If you knew.
Yes, exactly.
I do feel like now that I have grandchildren, you get to do it again, but without all the angst. And watching your children be parents, first of all, brings you closer to your children, because I think they, for the first time, really understand why I was late picking them up from school. And I would tell them, I was like in line in the grocery store, and I was trying to buy some milk, and somebody had like a 16,000 coupons, and it wasn't, and they realize now, okay, you try to sneak in this and that because you're working, you got all these things. And so they're more they're more understanding of my shortcomings grazing them, because they see how hard it is to raise children. So it does bring you closer to them, I think, when they have to parent themselves.
Well, so what do you say to your kid if they're being challenging to you? You should have a kid just like you someday.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, watching them go through some of the same things, I think they realize all those sleepless nights and all those, all that work of raising children. And I think you can't demand it. You just hope that you can't demand respect. I think you can't demand it, but you hope that they get it,
Yeah, listen, I think in most situations, they would learn to do this by example, by the way we honor our parents. Sometimes you see.
I hope, right. I always hope that, we had.
They saw you honoring your parents, so they'll hopefully got the message.
You hope. But I think children are having a harder time becoming adults today. I mean, there's just this longer period of adolescence that's into the late 20s, and even for some in the early 30s, where they're just having a harder time launching and growing up, and so it just delays this whole. I think this whole dynamic is changing, because I think kids are, for a variety of reasons. I mean, financial reasons. There was just this piece about why millennials are not like buying homes, because they don't have the income to do this, to grow up and and do the things that we did when we were in our early mid-20s, for example. So I think there's a whole more dependency. It's harder to just grow up, I think.
I think there's a lot about the willingness to have children. If they are focused on enjoying themselves, and having children is a game changer for life enjoyment. It's now you're gonna work. You're gonna really work and bring up these children. Like, you have to have I think that's become, maybe for our generation, we just understood it. We didn't, but we did it. Now the question is out there: why should I do this? I'm entitled to make my own path. That does change things, and maybe that will reverse a little the sense. When parents really do choose to have children, the children might
an older parent. It's hard. It's hard to be an older parent.
Do you have experience that?
Can you have small children still?
No. I have teenagers. I mean, but we were older parents to begin with, so I mean, it was tough. But it's so funny because I laugh when people say, "Well, when's a good time to have children?" I don't know if there's such a thing as a good time to have children.
Right.
Love to give them, and when they're born, how could your heart?
I thought it was 9 p.m. on a Friday night.
That's like really exactly. But I think also we honor our parents just by what we do in life. I think I honor my father, Alav Shalom. Just I never envisioned that I'd be sitting in the rabbi's office as the rabbi. It's just I think that it's no accident, and I think that I'm honoring him, and also the love and the music that I bring into my work as rabbi and cantor, that comes from my mom.
Was your father a rabbi?
No, but he just went religiously to synagogue, and open the Hertz Chumash, and he just would get it kind of thing and participate. And I was scared to death to say a word because there were a bunch of these and thous. I didn't know what was going on, but he really was the influencer early on.
But he didn't live to see you become a rabbi?
No, sadly, no. But he did live to see me married as the cantorial soloist and the educator. But
he's looking down from heaven.
I think so. I think so. I think I feel him as he's around.
That's interesting. You know, it could be that once a person's parents passes, you know, that sentiment becomes stronger. You know, when they're still alive, there's a more, I guess, practical relationship. You know, you're worried about taking care of them, and you're getting to different conversations. Whereas that thought that you just had, I think it's true for most of us. You know, if we think about what our parents gave us.
I'm amazed when when I teach classes of seniors, how much they talk about their parents and how influential our family lives are throughout our whole life. And I think when you get older, you circle back to that and really think a lot about your parents and what they, your childhood, and it's so consequential and makes it so scary as parents because I realize.
And I think just for me, I think every parent probably their goal, or one of their primary goals in raising a child, is to have them become self-sufficient, independent adults. And I think seeing that also is a way of a child honoring a parent, seeing them make it out there in the world.
I promised my parents that's going to happen soon.
Plus, it took me decades to find out what I was going to be when I grew up. So it's
Ken, can I ask you? You don't have to answer this question if it's too personal. Do your kids ever have express something or show something which other kids don't have because you made such an intentional decision to adopt them and take care of them and bring them up?
Can you give me an example or something?
Do they realize the kind of, you went the extra, you didn't just do what was natural. You went the extra step. You were extra kind. You were extra,
Yeah. Well, I think they both get that Judaism is a part of their lives, whether, because they're teenagers, so of course they're not as willing to, to participate as before, but they still know it. And also, it's funny too, because now my son is working in an after-school program with middle schoolers, and he talks about his kids now, and it's cute to watch him, and then especially when they're, rambunctious or not behaving or something, and it's.
Sorry,
it wasn't based on your question. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Good. Okay.
No, it's just it's cute to see my son now having kids to be responsible for, and sort of learning on the job as far as what it entails being a parent or just a trusted adult, if you will. And my daughter's 15, so she's still come up in the world, but I think they kind of get it on some level. Maybe they're not so explicitly in terms of saying it.
I mean, just the very fact that your son is doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure mine is. So, you never know where that came from.
He's still working on a high school diploma, so the jury's still out.
I'm sorry, but I have to leave. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah, you too. Okay, you too. Bye.
We'll see you next week, huh? Are we on next week?
Yeah, she's gone.
Okay, great. Okay, sorry, I have to go to a meeting. All right, take care.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, let's not go too much overtime here. Introduction, expanding the text, authority. The traditional understanding of authority has changed in recent times. The following sources explore the role authority plays in the parent-child relationship and beyond. This is a beautiful piece by Rabbi Hirsch. The knowledge and acknowledgement of historical facts depend solely on tradition, and tradition depends solely on the faithful transmission by parents to children and on the willing acceptance by children from the hands of their parents, so that the continuance of God's whole great institution of Judaism rests entirely on the theoretical and practical obedience of children to parents, and respecting parents is a basic condition for the eternal existence of the Jewish nation. Okay, number 2, if a father protests against his son marrying a specific woman that he, the son, wishes to marry, the son does not need to listen to his father. That's in the Shulchan Aruch. Source 3, you shall rise before an old person, you shall respect a learned person, shall fear your God, I am the Lord. That's what Sharon, you mentioned earlier, it's all together. And Rabbi Yochanan himself would stand before the Aramean, i.e. Gentile elders. He said, how many experiences, Rashi, hardships and miracles have occurred to these individuals? Conversation. In today's society, where does authority lie? What is the relationship between responsibility and authority? In contemporary society, there's an emphasis on individual authority to decide what is right for them. How does this pose a challenge to traditional roles of authority and respect? What is the obligation of parents to pass down Jewish tradition and values to the next generation? What are some of the challenges in fulfilling this obligation? Okay, let's talk about those a little.
I think sometimes as we age, it's like, when I teach some of the rising in front of aged people to like my younger students, they look at me like, what? And it's not always, they're not always treated with respect as you age. And you would think that this is the most important thing, that as you get older, you're wiser and you had your whole life. And sometimes, when you're old, people seem to, not treat you with respect, and you become sort of invisible in certain ways. And that's why it's so difficult to see, especially in some of the, nursing homes and whatnot, that you lose your autonomy there as well. So it's hard to see, and it's not always, I would think that perhaps as we become more of an aging society, that people do respect the aged. I'm happy to see that there are many older people running for president these days, and people can. But sometimes, you get a lot of people, what do they know? They lived and they've they don't, it's not valued, at least especially in, today's society with youth. It's such a youth-based, society. That's what's important. Young, looking young, feeling young, and I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is an appreciation for the wisdom of the aged.
Right, and you always think, they're forgetful, or that, and it's hard. Sometimes, it's nice to know, or rely on somebody who's lived through some of the experiences, who's a witness and knows things that we can't know because they've lived through a time that we're not here. Even looking towards some of the Holocaust survivors that are now dying out, we no longer have those witnesses, and to learn from them. I think it's important to learn from, our older.
Yeah, for sure.
I think,
it's funny, even, as I age, I'm not that old, I'm 50. But I see myself, whereas in my youth, I would run into things and, with all my vigor without really thinking through them or being alert to, what's really going on. And realizing, well, my parents really have that. They have there's a wisdom of age. There's a counsel. that can come with it. And yet, yeah, it's not in vogue to seek that. You know, we live in sometimes such a different world,
Right.
where they might not be able to advise us.
Yeah.
Right, but I think it's part of the honoring. I think just having the parent or older person or Bubby, Zadie, just feel like they're being heard.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe physically they're greatly limited, but as you said, Sharon, they have life experience, they have wisdom, they've accrued. They also have perspective because obviously they're not a younger person who thinks I'm going to live forever, and they get it. And so I think there's something to be valued in their words and their experiences and what they've gained on the way.
Right.
All right, integration. What does this diber mean to you as a core value? When can it be applied? What are the challenges you will face? How can you overcome them? Something that comes to me through today's discussion is.
Well, I think the subtitle of the lesson, dynamic relationship, I think that really holds true, and the dynamics change and can present challenges that need to be overcome.
Right. Yeah. Also, to me, just coming through today's conversation, sometimes there are commandments or mitzvot that you can just get up and do. This one takes a lot of thinking. It takes a lot of pause to consider who my parents are to me, what have they done for me, and that kind of energizes the whole diber, and I think will affect the way that I do it. There's definitely that need in a way to be aware. It's a sensitivity, not before an action. And I think we see that also in the way that people care for the elderly. Some people are very attentive, but they don't take nice care. They're not sensitive, they're not honoring, they're not, fearing, definitely not. They're not loving. And I think that could be, focusing on this diber could really improve that. All right. Sharon, the last word. What is this diber to you?
I guess, it kind of harkens back to, understanding from where you came from and having a respect for that they gave life to you. Just as I like that the way it started with, the topic of God, your God and your parents, all three had a part in your creation. So respecting your parents is the ultimate respect, to God and other people. Just to remember that, maybe as a core value, just remember to be, if you can, to be thankful and grateful for at least, and even especially if you're in a situation where it's not easy. Our relationships are not always easy, but they gave life to us. And so just to remember that, I think.
Okay, great, fantastic. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next week.
You too. Take care.
All right. Thank you. Bye.